Imagine finding and buying your perfect piece of property, 5, 10, 50 acres of the most pristine land you've ever seen. You start to develop the plans to put your custom home on and you realize, oh shoot, we never got that perk test that the realtor mentioned. We better get that done. Perk test comes back, it failed. The water does not absorb fast enough, or maybe it's absorbing too fast, which means you can't put a septic system on that land. Now you might have a piece of property that you cannot build on. You think, that's fine. We will just sell the property, go find something else. But that, my friend, is an adverse material fact. And that property is not going to be worth very much because you can't build on it. That is just one of several stories I'm about to share with you of some of the biggest mistakes we've seen when people buy land. Hope you grab a pen and piece of paper because I'm about to save you a whole bunch of time, money, and stress. Let's go. Welcome back. My name is Trent. I've been in this area for 32 years, and my team and I have helped dozens of people find their perfect piece of property here in North Idaho. Now, I'd like to say that we have an absolutely perfect stellar record, but that's not true. We've had a couple of clients that didn't decide to take our advice and they experienced some pretty bad stuff, lost a bunch of money. So today I'm going to be telling you the 10 biggest mistakes people make when buying land here in North Idaho. So hopefully you can avoid those mistakes, save yourself a whole bunch of time, money, and stress. So going back to that story, what is a percolation test? Well, percolation means how quickly does the water absorb into the ground or doesn't absorb into the ground. So when you're putting a septic system in, a lot of people don't know how those work. Septic systems keep the sludge in the bottom, and then the water comes up and goes out once it's gotten rid of the sludge. Now, if it's percolating too quickly, absorbing, it's going to get into the groundwater. It's going to put bad bacteria in there, make people sick. Or if it doesn't absorb fast enough, it's going to back into your septic system. Now, there are some other options if you can't do a septic system, but not every area is going to allow that. So yeah, you want to make sure you get that percolation test done. Next, you want to get that appraisal. Now, we have a lot of cash buyers. When you're buying with cash, you don't have to have an appraisal. Some people think we're going to save ourselves some money. Let's not get that appraisal. But the fact is, you have no idea if you are going to be overpaying for that property or not. Also, if it comes back lower than the actual asking price, you now have more negotiating power. So don't save that money. You might not be saving any money. You might be losing it in the cost of the property. So go ahead and cough up the money, get that appraisal, don't skip it. The next big mistake we see people make is they do not look deeply enough into the conditions, covenants, and restrictions of an area or the deed restrictions on that property. Now, what that means, those are the specific rules that have been written into law for what is allowed to be done in that area or on the property itself. So say you want to get 20 acres and your dream is to have a dirt bike track and open it up to the public so that they can come and play on it. That might be my dream, to be honest. But the fact is that not every area is going to allow that. Sometimes there's deed restrictions that say, no, you need to leave the land as it is as best you can. You can put a dwelling and a shop, but you can't change much on it. Or let's keep it more simple. Let's say you want to get some property and you just want to have cows and sheep and chickens, and you think, I'm way out in the country. Of course I can do that. Not necessarily. If you didn't look close enough at those CC&Rs and those deed restrictions, you could definitely be making a huge mistake. And it's important to remember, this is how it's going to affect your property value. If you're allowed to do something, so is your neighbor. So you might think, I'm never going to start a pig farm. That's never going to happen. Well, your neighbor might not feel that way. And you can bet that if you have a pig farm next to your property value just went down significantly. Now, the fourth mistake, we see this happen quite a bit. People will only walk the property maybe once or never. We saw that during the pandemic, people who would just buy property sight unseen. But the fact of the matter is that property might appear one way on a plot map, but when you're walking it, it might be a little bit different. You want to look out for encroachments or easements, things that maybe shouldn't be on your property or things that are partially on your property that belong to the seller, but they're also a little bit on the neighbor's property. So if you don't know about those things, you could be walking into a lawsuit real quick. Maybe the seller had a good relationship with the neighbor, and so they had a handshake agreement, which, guess what? That can be legal here in Idaho, which is pretty crazy. I'll make another video about that someday. But without having an official agreement, that agreement might not extend to the new buyers. So you could find yourself having to tear down a shop because you didn't actually check to make sure that it's in the right spot. Now that leads me to the next big mistake. People don't get a new survey. They go off of old surveys. It is an expense. You can look at anywhere from $6,000 to $2,000-$3,000, depending on how much of this stuff the surveyor needs to walk through. But the fact is that in Idaho, they used to use an old school way of surveying property called a topographic survey. And they would basically go, all right, so from that tree over there to that stump over there and that rock over there, that's your property line. Well, it was pretty accurate back then, but now, I mean, trees might have been knocked over. A forest fire could have happened. You want to get a new survey so that you know where your property begins and where it ends. Because if you don't know that, that is where you get into lawsuits. That is where you get into trouble, because you might have just built a fence on the wrong side of the property and your neighbor he's real angry because maybe you're not from here and he doesn't like out-of-towners. I don't know. But these things happen. So do not skip paying for that new survey. Now, if you have an old survey, yeah, go out and walk it. Go and look for the stakes and the property markers so that you know based on that survey where it is, but definitely get it verified with a new survey. And just so you know, if there is an encroachment or an easement that is involved with that property, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you have to reject that property. It just means that you got to have the right easement or encroachments agreements written up and signed, and a good realtor should be able to do that. With that said, that is why we are here. We help a lot of people who are getting land here in Idaho avoid the nightmare of some of these mistakes that are made. You don't have to work with us, but I definitely recommend that you work with a knowledgeable agent to save yourself a really big headache. And with that said, here's that story of one of our clients that made a big mistake. A couple years ago, we had a client who really wanted to buy the property next to his friend's property. It was about 20 acres. And his friend had told him, hey, I got the well test, I got everything done. You're totally fine, just purchase that property. Well, we encouraged that buyer to not just trust his friend. Yet I'm sure his friend is an honest guy, but maybe there was a mistake made. And he said, no, I'm gonna save some money. I trust my friend, so he bought the lot next to him. Well, he goes to develop it and get a well drilled. The well company comes out and goes, hey, you know that the water table is about 450 feet, don't you? And he goes, no, I did not. And unfortunately, he had a bit of a tight budget, and that was outside of his budget. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to sell it. And his friend comes to him and offers him about 80% of the cost that he just paid because, hey, that is an adverse material fact, and you're going to have a hard time getting that from anybody else, so you might as well sell it to me. Not a very good friend, unfortunately. And that guy did end up taking that hit. So definitely get the well reports. They're not that hard to get. And just do that before you buy the property. A good agent will get those for you. You definitely want to know. You definitely want to know where that water table is. It's not always a sure thing, but you can budget for it. Getting a well can be very, very expensive. Now, most of the wells up here, they're not that deep. But some are. You really need to know what you're about to spend to get that well. I got a few more to cover, but hopefully you're taking this seriously and you are taking notes. It's no joke. You can really be in a nightmare situation if you do not follow these. So let's get on to the next one. Number 7 is do not skip doing the research on the zoning laws and make sure you know that utilities are accessible. Now, with zoning laws, they're not fun. It's extremely boring stuff, and that is why agents get paid pretty well, because they dig into this stuff that nobody else wants to. Now, with zoning laws, you might be buying a piece of property and you think, well, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I got 20 acres. I'm going to build a self-storage unit to help me fund this property and bring in a little bit of money. Zoning laws might not allow that. And if you don't know that, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. We've had stories around here where people were starting to build. They got pretty deep into a big project only to find out that the county had changed the zoning laws and the agent was looking at the wrong ones. That was not a good situation. Luckily, not one of ours, but that stuff can happen. Now, regarding utilities, you really want to look and find out where are the utilities. Here is the big tip that you are definitely going to want to write down. I used to work for the telecommunications companies, and I cannot tell you how many times when I was out in the country that their map would show, yeah, we have utilities out there. They weren't there. So not only do you want to look at the map on their website, you want to also call them and verify, hey, Are these there? Oh yeah, no, those are there. Then either you or your agent goes out and looks, verifies with their own eyes. It can be extremely expensive to bring power and gas into your property. Or if you're really needing internet, can you get internet out there? These are things that you really want to look at, because a property that cannot get power or gas or whatever else you need out there, that's going to lose value pretty quick. So do the research on that. Now, number 8, I'd like you to go in the comment section and tell me if you would have thought of this on your own, because this is a very obvious one, but not everybody thinks to do it. Go and talk to the neighbors. Go ask them how they like their property, how long they've been there. Are there any feuds going on between the seller and the neighbors? You can learn a lot of things that aren't on the title report by talking to the neighbors. And I'll tell you, if you're a decent person and you're kind and respectful, the neighbors will tell you all sorts of things. It's also a great opportunity to find out if you're going to have neighbors that are kind of jerks. You don't want that, right? You want to make sure that you're living next to somebody that you're going to get along with. That is one of the most common civil suits, is people suing each other over what they're doing on their land because they don't like it. So definitely do that. You can learn a lot about what's going on in an area by talking to them. You can also ask them if there's things about that property that you're not seeing. The next thing that we're going to worry about here, and the big mistake people make, is the flood zones and wetlands. Now, this is a thing up here in Idaho. There are areas that look very dry in the summer, but during the fall, spring, and winter, they're wetlands. And when you have wetlands, that severely limits what you can do with that property. You can also end up being in a flood zone. Now, this is super simple to figure out. FEMA has mapped this all out for us. You can go on FEMA's website, look at the map, and look at the flood zones. Now, you're going to see different ratings for flood zones. You're going to see A being the worst, B being fairly moderate, C doesn't happen very often, and X, it's not going to happen at all. So a lot of these are 100-year flood zones. And what that means is you have a 1% chance every year of that flooding. But obviously with A, it's very likely that it's going to happen. So make sure you check into that, because without knowing that, you might be dealing with a bad situation and your insurance could be significantly more costly. And this last one, you absolutely do not want to skip. Do not try to save some money here. It is not a scam, I promise you, like most insurances might feel like. Title insurance, title policy, this is going to cover you and the property. You don't know what that seller has been up to, and you don't know if maybe they owe some people some money, and those people might have a lien, or there might be back taxes or encumbrances on that title. So by paying that title policy fee, you're going to have an attorney that looks at the deed and digs in and finds out, is there anything that is marking up this title, making it not a good deal? And you might be responsible for those fees. If they miss it, you buy that property and somebody comes after you for money, they're the ones who owe it. So that is a very good thing. You don't want those kind of surprises. Now look, this is just scratching the surface on what you need to know about getting moved to Idaho and buying property here. You definitely want to check out my other videos. And if you are serious about getting moved here, you can always just give us a call. The phone number or email address listed below. Again, don't have to work with us, but make sure that you work with a really good agent who's familiar with land deals and knows what they're doing. I look forward to seeing you on the next video, and thanks for watching this one.